Chapter 2. My cousin, who was always listening to her radio, had heard that the salsa orchestra called El Gran Combo was going to be playing at Casablanca. She called me immediately and asked if I could do her a favor. Since she mentioned El Gran Combo, I thought that maybe she wanted me to get her tickets or something for the show. However, she only asked if I could take some pictures with her camera. I didn't have a choice since she gently reminded me that she had gotten me that job. In truth, I said yes, hoping that she would forget about it, but unfortunately she didn't. That night I arrived at the club with my dear cousin's camera, one of those cheap Kodaks 110. To make matters worse, she had given me one of El Gran Combo's records so that every member would sign it. I remember well that night since the place had never been more packed. All the mothers were elegantly dressed and accompanied by their significant others, and there were floral arrangements everywhere. The tables were decorated with white sheets, candles and small arrangements. The place smelled like flowers and perfume, which gave me allergies. There were only 4 of us waiting tables and every customer wanted to be served at the same time. Unfortunately, some of the people there, including the mothers, transformed into monsters after a few drinks. Only a fellow waiter knows what it's like to walk through a room packed with people carrying a tray full of drinks. Panic can instill if when you get to your table someone from another one pulls you by the arm carrying the drinks, to tell you waiter another beer. To sum up, that night was hell. Women who had way much to drink insisted on dancing with me. They didn't want to hear about the rules of my workplace. They still wanted to dance even with me having an arm full of drinks. It was difficult to take pictures of the group. I managed to get some while they were playing and others when they were on break. I must confess something that my cousin is not going to like. I left the record behind the bar, but I told her that all of them had signed it, but someone then stole it. The truth is that I didn't have the courage to go up to them and ask that each would sign the record. She got mad because she thought I'd stolen the record, but she was happy when I brought her camera back. By closing time I could barely stand my feet. Also, I looked like I'd just gotten out of a sauna, clothes on and all. I called it a night after emptying the ashtrays and organizing my tables. Afterwards, I went to the bar to get my cigarettes and the camera, but I left the record. I knew that when I came back it was going to be gone. Now that I think about it, I actually didn't lie when I told my cousin her record was stolen. I headed to the parking lot, where the partying continued. There were couples everywhere. It was after 4 a.m. and these people were still at it. At that time the women didn't look so elegant and the men were not behaving like gentlemen. I walked through the crowd to my car like a zombie. I only had one thing in mind: getting home. Finally I got to my car, anxious to leave. Little by little the other cars started to head out. I placed the camera in the glove compartment. I turned the engine on and I took off as usual. I took the main road, road number 2, until I reached the intersection that took me to La Bajura. Once I started heading down this sector I noticed a dense fog on the road, very thick and white. It was nothing out of the ordinary. I had gone through the same area at around the same time, 4:30 in the morning. I was driving very slowly, paying close attention to the road. My thoughts at the time were of possibly encountering an animal on the road and preventing an accident. Also I thought of the pain in my feet and what I'd fixed myself to eat when I got home. All of a sudden I heard a noise, as if someone or something were running close to my car and was trying to catch up and pull right next to me. Everything happened very fast. I heard the steps and thought it was some kind of animal, when out of the corner of my eye I perceived a movement on my left-hand side. I turned my head and what I saw was not a cow or a lamb. My mind didn't know what to think. A boy with a costume? But, at this hour? A midget? Yes, it was a midget with a mask scaring the people going by. A midget? No, it can't be, I thought to myself. Its head, those eyes, no, even the mouth, nothing was. Go away, I told myself. It was something like a bizarre little man running beside my car. In my panic I intended to hit the gas, but I hit the brake instead and the car came to an abrupt stop. I looked through the windshield wanting to keep going far away from that place, far from that strange creature that was running beside my car without taking its strange eyes off of me. I couldn't do this, however, because now that being with the enormous head was right in front of my car, on the right side, walking towards me from the fog. The right headlight of my car was now on him, making it look even more grotesque. Its pale skin was reminiscent of clown makeup. It was wearing tight fighting clothes, olive green in color. The clothing didn't shine or had anything distinct features other than who or what was wearing it. Its arms were proportionate with its body, which was about 3.5 feet tall. I thought to myself, how could it ever reach that side of my car so quickly? In response I heard another noise beside my door. There was the creature beside me again, but much closer. It was then that I realized that there were actually 2 creatures, or people, demons, or whatever. I felt them opening the door. I couldn't take it anymore. I found myself paralyzed. I don't know if it was fear, sheer terror or something else, but I simply couldn't move. Again, everything happened very quickly, in a matter of seconds. I couldn't handle it anymore and I fainted. I want the reader to know that at the time never did it cross my mind that there was a possibility these could be extraterrestrial creatures. The subject never really attracted my attention. I thought they might be monsters or demons, but never beings from space. When I came to, I was still in my car, confused, and when I looked around I thought I was in some sort of underground parking. I say this because that place was not outside, there were other cars there, another 10 or so. There were no doors or signs. It was subtly lit and was light gray in color. I noticed the other cars were empty and there was utter silence. I remember listening to my own agitated breathing and peeking out to find a way out, a door, or some sign that would point to an exit. The clearer and alert my mind became, the more desperate I got. I felt I was out of air and my breathing became even more irregular. I started to feel very claustrophobic. I didn't hear any sound nor did I hear it arrive. There, right beside me was that little man with the chilling eyes. I remember making an odd frightened sound but I didn't utter a word. I felt paralyzed. Its eyes were piercing and when I saw him I remembered what had transpired on the road. During those brief seconds I forgot about not knowing where I was and how to get out of there. All of my being was fixed on that creature with the fetus head and almond-shaped cow eyes. He looked at me without any sort of emotion or facial expressions. Seated at the wheel of my car I felt hopeless, like a trapped little animal. I tried everything to deny this fact, but to no avail. All of a sudden it started to raise its right arm until I could see his little hand. I became even more tense. My hands were at the wheel. I'm surprised I didn't yank it off. I couldn't move or take my hands off of it. Truth be told, I probably shouldn't say I really couldn't move because I never tried. I think that my dazed and traumatized mind didn't let me. My brain was incapable or commanding my body. The creature was reaching for my forehead. I felt repugnance, disgust. Imagine if someone would reach for your face with something you're terrified of, like a snake, a mouse or anything that would cause you panic. Its hand for me was all those things wrapped up in one. This strange being, whom I still considered something diabolical, placed the palm of its hand on my forehead, and with a last spasm of repugnance my mind went blank. When I woke up I found myself seated with other people in a squared room. My neck and hands were hurting, I felt my eyes swollen. Where was I? Where was my car? I couldn't really distinguish where the room's walls began or ended. It gave the impression of being a big infinite space instead of a room. The floor, walls and ceiling were all light gray in color, and like the other place I didn't see any lamps, light bulbs, entrances, exits, or windows, but I figured that logically, although none of this seemed logical, there had to be doors and lights even though I couldn't see them. Where did the light come from? I didn't know. If a person were to stand in the middle of this room, alone, with no point of reference, you would think he'd be standing in a great void. With me there were 14 other people, men and women, and from the looks of it Hispanic. We were seated in some sort of chairs or long benches. You couldn't really see these seats at a single glance. Only because I was seated on one of them I could tell they were there. How I got there was a mystery to me. The floor, walls, and ceiling were of the same color tone which gave the appearance of total continuity, like a camouflage or optical illusion. I was still a little dazed when I noticed that the creatures were right in front of us. I saw them over the shoulders of the people in front of me. No one said a word and you could sense the terror in the air. I could barely move, I was only able to turn my head and with great difficulty. I felt a cramp in my neck. I was seated in the left-hand side of the last row. Each row had 5 people and there were 3 rows in total. To my right there was a teenager. He was wearing shorts, was barefoot and didn't have a shirt on. He looked a lot like my brother when he was a teenager. When I saw the fear in his face I wanted to try and ease it but I couldn't. The others were dressed in different ways, from party clothes to sleepwear. Meanwhile, there stood those 2 with the extraordinary heads completely still. Every once in a while they would blink very slowly. All of our attention was directed towards them. Coming from an undetermined place behind us, there approached another being who wore black clothing. He walked towards the creatures and stood between them. His skin color was that of someone who has a tan, it had a copper-like tone. His hair was black and straight and he wore it a little over shoulder length. It was combed back. He was very handsome. His shirt, which didn't seem to have buttons or pockets, had long, slightly loose sleeves. His pants were slim-fitting at the waist yet slightly loose in the legs and a little tapered at the bottom. His shirt was tucked in and he wore black boots. He was approximately 5'7" or 5'8". His body was slim but toned. After taking position, he addressed us in perfect Spanish with no accent in particular, Welcome, my name is Amaury. I'm not here to hurt you. Relax, don't be frightened. I come from a planet that goes by the name of Ka, which is pronounced like your letter of the alphabet K, and it is my home planet. I am as human as you are. These were more or less his words. I want to stress that these were not his exact words. I only remember the idea or message. Therefore, though I will stay true to what he told us, the order of the words or sentences I'll transcribe as best as my memory serves me. If at this very moment you'd stop reading, close your eyes and try to remember word for word a conversation or a lecture that happened 4 years ago, you could not. I'm sure that also you would only be able to remember the idea and not every word. I will do my very best to faithfully transcribe his revelations, given that 4 years have passed since my initial experience. After stating his first words, he noticed that he didn't quite have our undivided attention. The truth was that we were disturbed by the presence of the little men with the bulging eyes. He then told us not to be afraid of the AMAURY'S. As he said this, he took one of them in his arms as if it was a small child. The creature wrapped his arms around his neck and his thin legs around his waist. As if carrying a chimpanzee, the man put his hand on the small being's chin and turned his grotesque head from side to side while telling us that there was no reason to be afraid of them since they were not harmful. They're made by his people. Genetically constructed, he told us. The AMAURY only blinked slowly, expressionless. Even after he told us this, they were still repugnant to me, in my opinion. At least now I had stopped thinking about demons and I began to have a notion of what was happening, impossible as it seemed. They were from another world, another planet. They weren't demons after all. I actually thought that this Amaury looked too much like an earthling to be an extraterrestrial. On the other hand, I could see it for the little ones with the fetal heads. Them I could consider extraterrestrial, but what did I know? He spoke to us again. We have brought you here to show you some projections. The images you are about to see will seem real to you, but they're not. They are multidimensional projections. They will appear to have mass, consistency and palpable qualities. What you'll see will be emotionally and spiritually strong. Keep in mind that what you'll be seeing is not really happening. We'll begin with the first one.